It all started with what should have been a regular afternoon. A woman walked into a luxury car dealership, excited and hopeful, just like anyone would be when they're ready to make a big purchase. She wasn't there to browse. She knew exactly what she wanted. But the moment she stepped through those glass doors, the atmosphere shifted. The sales staff barely acknowledged her. Some glanced at her, then quickly looked away. Others whispered among themselves. And then, in the most humiliating way, she was told she didn't belong there. Without much explanation, they asked her to leave. She stood there, stunned. Dressed simply without flashy jewelry or designer labels, she didn't look like the typical luxury buyer. But what the staff didn't know was that appearances can be deceiving, and they had just made a huge mistake. No one asked her what she did, where she came from, or why she was there. They only saw what they wanted to see. And that one assumption? It was going to cost them big. That night, what happened next? Let's just say the dealership was about to get a lesson in respect, humility, and the power of keeping your judgments in check. But before we get into that, let's rewind just a little to where this story really begins. Because there's a lot more to this woman, her husband, and their quiet rise to success than anyone could have guessed. Years before that moment, at the dealership, life wasn't always smooth for the couple. They didn't come from wealth. In fact, they had struggled for years, working long hours, cutting corners to make ends meet, and building something from scratch while the world barely noticed. She was a school teacher once, pouring her heart into every lesson, while her husband ran a small repair shop that barely brought in enough to cover the bills. But together, they dreamed bigger. Every evening after work, they'd sit at the kitchen table, scribbling ideas on napkins and scrap paper, business plans, investment thoughts, ways to grow. Slowly, piece by piece, they made progress. One small win led to another. Her husband started flipping used cars in their garage, fixing them up and selling them for a little profit. She helped with the paperwork and bookkeeping after school. It wasn't glamorous, but it was honest work, and they were good at it. Over time, those cars turned into a full business. They started buying in bulk, importing rare models, and making a name for themselves, quietly, without showing off. But they never forgot how people used to treat them when they had less. That's why the moment she walked into that dealership, wearing jeans and no makeup, she didn't expect to be judged. She believed people would see her for who she was, not what she wore. Unfortunately, not everyone thinks that way. The staff at the dealership didn't recognize her. They didn't know she now co-owned a successful auto import company with her husband. They didn't know she could have bought any car on that lot, cash in hand, without blinking. But none of that mattered to them. All they saw was someone they assumed didn't belong, and that's where they went wrong. Back at home, her husband knew exactly what this was about. He had seen it before, doors closed because of looks, not worth. That's when he made a quiet decision to show them the truth. Not with anger, not with loud words, but with something they couldn't ignore. And the next day, when he rolled up in that Rolls-Royce, he wasn't just making a statement. He was starting something much bigger. The moment the Rolls-Royce came to a smooth stop in front of the dealership, silence fell over the entire showroom. The staff who had brushed her off the day before now rushed to the windows, whispering guesses about who this mystery buyer might be. Some straightened their ties, others quickly checked their reflections in the glass. They were ready to welcome what they assumed would be a VIP, someone famous, maybe a celebrity or a business mogul. What they didn't expect was to see the very same woman from yesterday step out of the passenger side. This time, she didn't say a word. Her husband walked around the car, calm and confident, every movement slow and deliberate. He looked around the dealership and locked eyes with the very salesperson who had turned his wife away. The man stiffened, trying to smile. But it was too late for charm now. What they didn't know, what none of them could have guessed, was that this couple had been quietly watching the luxury car market for years. They weren't just buyers. They were competitors. Their auto import business had grown so strong that they were now looking to purchase premium vehicles not just for themselves, but for high-end clients across the country. And this dealership? It had been on their radar for a possible business partnership. Now, that opportunity was gone. Behind the scenes, there were other layers to this story. One of the junior staff, a young woman who had noticed how poorly the wife was treated, had felt uncomfortable about it all. She hadn't spoken up, but it had stayed with her. Now, seeing the couple return in luxury, something about it stirred her. Maybe she had judged too quickly, too. Meanwhile, the dealership's high manager, unaware of the full story, was watching everything unfold from his office upstairs. He sensed something wasn't right, but he was about to find out just how deep the mistake ran. The staff still didn't know who this man was, or why he had chosen their dealership for this dramatic entrance. But the next few moments would start, unraveling everything, and by then, it would be too late to take any of it back. As the couple stepped into the dealership, the energy in the room shifted. Eyes followed their every move. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. The same people who had looked past her the day before were now stumbling over themselves to offer water, a seat, anything to make up for their sudden change in tone. But neither of them said much. The husband walked with quiet confidence, his wife by his side, still calm but with a certain fire in her eyes. The manager, now alert to the tension, came rushing down from his office, trying to piece together what he had missed. He greeted them with a practiced smile, but the silence that followed was louder than any words. The husband finally spoke, and when he did, his voice was calm, measured, but carried the weight of everything that had happened. He asked to speak to whoever had helped his wife the previous day. A few glances passed around the room, and the salesperson who had dismissed her now stood frozen, caught between shame and fear. But this wasn't about revenge, not in the way the staff might have expected. The husband wasn't here to yell or create a scene. Instead, he began asking sharp, pointed questions about their business model, sales, process, and partnerships. He revealed just enough to make it clear that he wasn't just another customer. He had done his homework. And then, slowly, it clicked. The name of his company, the clients he worked with, the luxury car events he had attended. One by one, the staff began to realize who they were dealing with. Meanwhile, the young junior employee who had stayed silent the day before was watching closely. Her guilt from not stepping in was growing heavier. She debated whether to speak up, to apologize. She could see the storm building and felt like she was right in the middle of it. Tension hung thick in the air. The couple had come back not just to prove a point, but to expose something deeper. How quick people are to judge, how easily respect is given to the wrong things. And just when it felt like things couldn't get any more intense, he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a folder. That's when everyone held their breath. The folder in his hand wasn't thick, but it looked official. Clean, sharp edges, stamped with a logo only a few people in the room recognized. The manager's face stiffened. He leaned in, trying to catch a glimpse, but the husband didn't open it right away. Instead, he looked around slowly, locking eyes with each staff member, the same ones who had ignored his wife like she didn't matter. Then, finally, he spoke. "This," he said, holding the folder up, "was supposed to be a proposal. A heavy silence followed. The staff waited, unsure of what he meant. The manager took a step forward, suddenly pale. He had heard rumors over the past few months that a new luxury auto group was looking to invest in independent dealerships, quietly acquiring a few select ones across the region. Until now, it had all been talk. But this made it real. And worse, they'd just blown the opportunity in the most embarrassing way possible. Then came the twist no one saw coming. He flipped open the folder and revealed a set of printed emails and documents. These weren't just papers about a business deal. They were email threads, conversations, negotiations. And right there, in black and white, was proof that the same dealership had already been in early talks with his company, weeks ago. The staff had no idea. Even the manager looked stunned. They had been entertaining a potential partnership with the very people they had just mistreated. The husband looked directly at the manager now. "We were going to sign by the end of this month, expand your reach, clean up the inventory process, bring in high-end clientele who trust our name. But yesterday," he paused, glancing toward his wife, "you showed us exactly how you treat people when you don't think they matter." The room was frozen, and just as the gravity of what they'd lost began to settle in, another figure stepped forward, the young employee who had stayed quiet. Her voice shook a little, but she spoke clearly, cutting through the tension like a blade. "I saw what happened, and I should have said something." But her words weren't the final surprise of the day, because what she said next turned the entire situation on its head. The young employee took a shaky breath. Everyone turned toward her, surprised she had stepped forward at all. She glanced at the woman, then back to the husband, her voice steadying with each word. "I remember her coming in. I saw how she was treated, and I knew it was wrong. I didn't speak up, and I should have. But I want you to know, not everyone here thought she didn't belong." There was a long pause. The woman nodded slightly, acknowledging her courage. It was a small moment, but it pierced through the tension, like light cracking through a closed door. Then, without raising his voice, the husband looked back at the manager. "One person tried. That's one more than I expected." He closed the folder and laid it gently on the glass counter. The manager was now visibly rattled. He had just connected the dots. This wasn't just about a customer walking away. It was about a partnership that could have taken their dealership to the next level. It was about reputation, relationships, and a missed chance they'd never get back. Then came the final twist. The husband reached into his coat one last time, pulled out a second envelope, and handed it, not to the manager, not to the salesman, but to the young employee. "We're still expanding," he said calmly. "We need people who have the courage to do the right thing, even when it's uncomfortable. If you ever decide you're ready for something more, this is an offer." She opened it slowly, eyes widening. Inside was a personal invitation to join his company, with a training opportunity, full benefits, and a position already waiting. The room went completely silent. The woman, who had been quiet through it all, finally spoke. Her voice was soft but powerful. "This wasn't about the car. It never was. It was about respect." They turned, walked out together, and drove away in the Rolls-Royce, leaving behind stunned faces and a dealership forced to confront its own values. And just like that, the couple didn't just walk away with their dignity intact. They walked away having made a statement the whole room would never forget. In the days that followed, word spread fast. The dealership's staff couldn't stop talking about what had happened. Some felt embarrassed, others defensive. But for most, it was a wake-up call. People started questioning how they treated customers, not just the ones who walked in wearing expensive watches, but everyone. The manager, shaken by the near loss of a major business opportunity, called for a full staff meeting. Policies were revisited, training was scheduled, and the tone inside the dealership slowly began to shift. But even with those changes, Something had already been lost, and it wasn't just a partnership, it was trust. As for the young employee, she thought long and hard about the offer she received. A few weeks later, she handed in her notice and stepped into a brand new role at the couple's company. There, she found something she hadn't experienced before: mentorship, support, and a culture where people were valued not for how they looked, but for how they showed up. She thrived in the new environment, and her decision to speak up, even after the fact, became the moment that changed her career. The couple kept growing their business, quietly and steadily. They didn't seek revenge. They never posted about the incident or dragged anyone's name online. But those who were there never forgot. The Rolls-Royce wasn't just a car that day. It became a symbol of quiet power, earned respect, and the lesson that success doesn't always announce itself with noise. The woman, once turned away without a second glance, had returned not with anger, but with grace. And in doing so, reminded everyone that true worth can't be seen on the surface. It's found in how people treat others when they think no one's watching. In the end, it wasn't just a story about a dealership, a luxury car, or even a deal gone wrong. It was about perception, humility, and the quiet strength of those who rise without needing to prove anything, because they already know who they are. And sometimes the best response isn't slamming doors. It's opening new ones where people are truly seen.